So, Joe, we've finally did it. We had news break last week during our recording, or just after we were supposed to be finished
Yeah,
recording.
yeah. Good thing NASCAR ran late.
Yeah, if NASCAR hadn't run late, we would have been finished and done by the time Major League Baseball announced that a deal had been reached on health and safety. And that,
Yeah, I mean, this is very good news. But of course, it doesn't come without some of its drawbacks, some criticism, and possibility of the season being shut down partway through. So
yeah,
let's, I guess, jump right into this then.
yeah. So as we said last week, just as we were wrapping up recording, Major League Baseball and the Major League Players Association, after months of back and forth, months of haggling over games, pay, health, and stuff, finally agreed to something, which is basically to let Major League Baseball dictate a schedule and then uh, have have the players sign off on health. So what was agreed upon was that Major League Baseball would set a 60 game schedule starting on July 23rd for 6 teams and July 24th for the rest. Now, as of recording, the schedule is not out, though the one tidbit we do know of is that two of the 6 teams on opening night on the 23rd of July will be the New York Yankees at the Washington Nationals, setting up on paper a matchup between Garrett Cole and Max Scherzer, which will be very interesting and
Yeah, I'm excited to
yeah,
see that matchup.
it's a good
Very
it's a good way to
excited.
restart everything with a bang. And also importantly to note is that date, July 23rd, for all of the back and forth between player the baseball sides. That is still earlier than the NBA. That is still earlier than NHL, who has still yet to announce a date, and we'll get to that later on in the episode. The only one that it does not agree that it's not earlier is Major League Soccer, who will return on the 15th with a return to play tournament.
Yeah, but
But
this is America. We don't care about
yeah,
soccer.
for in all intents and purposes, baseball is still going to be the first of the big four major sports to return to play, and that is not to say of other things that while most spring training games are effectively canceled, or as it's being billed, summer training by Major League Baseball, and and games will be in their home stadiums rather than in spring training grounds due to the recent outbreaks in Arizona and Florida. Teams will be permitted to schedule up to 3 spring summer training contests against other teams. So
Hmm.
there will still be a few games even before that deadline. Now some
And what
yeah
what has been made clear is that Governor Cuomo for New York has allowed for the players coming from Florida to not have to self quarantine for the 2 weeks, because that has now been sort of like an implemented thing amongst like New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. So that was something we were kind of worrying about last week, and I guess the weeks before, with all Florida being a little loosey goosey.
yeah
And now it seems like it's going to be okay.
yeah, and
Uh,
all signs are well, it hasn't been confirmed. All signs are pointing that yeah, Canada will be the same way in relation to the
mhm.
Toronto Blue Jays. On the off chance that they do not, the Blue Jays are set to play at their AAA stadium in Buffalo instead. Uh,
Not too far over the border.
yeah, yeah. Now the schedule, it's going to be 40 games against divisional opponents and 20 interleague contests versus geographical counterparts interleague.
Now,
Breaking down as, if I recall, it's going to be that breaks down as about let's see, so that's 4. So
I think there was like
that
6 games or something between everyone other than your like rival in your opposite league.
yeah, that it's basically 10 games against your divisional opponents,
Hmm.
3 games against interleague non-rivals, and 6 games, no, 4 games against non interleague rivals and 6 games against your
Yeah.
interleague rivals. So what that means is the Mets have the unfortunate distinction of now having 1/10 of their season played against the Yankees. And
I think it's honestly the other way around. The Yankees always either split with the Mets or they get their butts handed to them for whatever. I mean, you remember right before when the Yankees weren't in the playoffs for a couple of years, they finished like 4 or 5 games back, and that was because they lost all 4 games to the Mets and got swept by the lowly Chicago White Sox that year, and that was the big difference.
Yeah, but at the same time, they don't like that the defending champ Nationals get to play 6 games against the Baltimore Orioles, who is no argument is a much different and much easier opponent to them than the Yankees would be.
I mean, not to jinx anything, but you don't know who's going to get sick and who has to call up into their 60-man roster to replace half their team.
Yeah. And let's talk about that actually. That's a good segue.
Because that's kind of very important.
There's a hundred something page rule book on all the special rules that will come in, and we're not just talking about the universal DH, which is only for this season. It is not for 2021 as of yet. Although reports are that some of the non-agreed upon things, including an expanded playoffs, could still be negotiated as the season progresses.
And I know you have a story about that, but it's really hot in our bedrooms, respective bedrooms, so we'll skip that story for now.
Yeah, but among things that can be done and can be not, you remember how we were all talking about how the Astros would face retribution for in their sign stealing? Not anymore. If players instigate a brawl, they can be suspended up to 20 games. So basically 1/3 of the season for starting a bench's clearing brawl. Similarly, any player or manager who comes within 6 feet of an umpire to argue a call could receive a ejection and suspension.
Now, what does that mean if, and it's a little nitpicky, but if you're the batter and you're disagreeing with a pitch, I mean, you're like 2 feet from the umpire at that point. Do you have to, like, step out because you're not allowed to step out of the batter's box?
I haven't.
How does that work?
Yeah, I haven't seen anything, but I assume based on that logic that the umpire is going to be recessed a little further back than when he normally is. But I have not seen language based on that. Then again, it's also 100 pages worth of regulations. So
and we all know how much I love reading things I don't really want to read.
Clearly, other things that have happened
Runner at second base.
Runners will start at second base in the 10th inning or later to expedite extra inning games.
And that will be the batter in the batting order previous to the leadoff batter of the current extra inning. So in their example, it was if the number 5 hitter is up to bat in like the top of the 10th, the number 4 hitter or whoever is the pinch runner will be put at second base. Unless if it is the pitcher, I guess if you do a double switch, then it would be the next batter before that.
From what I've heard, it's whoever makes the final out of the previous inning is put on that base. So in that logic, if say Aaron Judge strikes out to end the bottom of the 9th, in the bottom of the 10th, he's placed on second. He or whoever pinch runs for him is placed on second base. Similarly, if Aaron Judge tries to steal second base and is thrown out, he gets second base, but only on the next inning. And while they treat it as if the runner was placed on an error, no error will be charged to the team.
No error will be charged. Pitcher won't be caught for the run.
And from the discourse I've seen on that subject, people are fine with it for this season and only this season.
It's some like low ball, softball garbage.
And then the most important thing is players. Now, over the week this past Sunday, teams submitted a 60-man roster, which is not full, but is full of players who are eligible to play. These are the only players who are allowed in camp for the season, with the exception of up to 2 teams that will be located in Nashville that of players who can be signed by any of the 30 clubs. If these rosters will open up as a 30-man roster to start the season, shrink down to I believe 28 after the 15th game, and then after the 30th game, shrink down to the 26-man roster with a 27th man should a doubleheader be scheduled. Other things, players have the right to opt out. Players who fall into a high-risk category, i.e., they are cancer survivors, have immediate family members, I believe, who are.
Yep.
Who
So actually, we
are,
have Ryan Zimmerman of
Yeah.
Mr. National here. He has already said that he is not going to be there.
Yeah.
He's got family that's sick, and I think he said his mother or mother-in-law or
Yeah.
something has MS. So after the season ends, he'd still be away for another couple weeks after that, and you don't know how fast MS can advance on that.
Yeah.
So he definitely doesn't want to miss that.
Yeah, he's able to opt out. Joe Ross.
But he will not get paid though.
Yeah, and I was gonna get to that. The players who are not high risk, which include Ryan Zimmerman, they can opt out, but they do not count for pay or service time. So Ryan Zimmerman does not get paid. Joe Ross, his teammate, also does not get paid. And Mike Leake of the Arizona Diamondbacks, who wishes to stay with his family, also does not get paid. But someone, and one important person who is going to play but could opt out, because he's a cancer survivor, is the Cubs' Anthony Rizzo. He has said that at the moment he will be playing, although players who are in the high risk category can opt in or out at any time. Players who are not in the high risk category, if they opt out, that's it. They cannot reconsider their decision.
Yep. You said we said some players will not get paid, and I'm trying to break part of this down here. It said that the March agreement, MLB advanced players $170 million in salary. Players guaranteed contracts would get a little bit more than $280,000. If you have minor league splits, their deals are 60, 30, or 16.5K. Players on the team's 40-man roster for the first time, like Atlanta's top prospect, Christian Pache, would receive the lowest sum. So it said that his contract normally calls for 46K in the split, but that's a full season. So his salary would be around $17,000, meaning he could spend apparently the next 3 months playing baseball during training camp, August, September, being ready, and it said he'd get a grand total of about $500. I'm not really sure how that works, going from 17 to 500.
It's basically because they were given an advance on their salary, and their salary is tied to prorated to whatever the game.
So that would be what's left then.
Yeah. Interestingly, there were I believe there were 15 or 17 players who initially people thought would have owed salary back to their teams, essentially having to pay to play baseball. But it's since been clarified that they will simply not get additional pay, if I recall, and will not have to refund the team any of their advance pay. That is basically forgiven. Other things I forgot about, rule scheduling. One rule that was supposed to be in play if the season started normally was that a position player who came in to pitch would have only been able to do it if
they were down by like 6 runs, or it was like extra innings or something like that. But now that is thrown out.
Yeah, that rule is thrown out. Although all players eligible to participate in the game must be included on that game's lineup card.
Yes, and then also with the 3-person taxi squad, if you use 3 of those players for that day, for that game, one of them must be a catcher, and you can't just be like, oh, well, Billy Bob Brown is the designated catcher today, even though he's never played catcher. Like, before the season, he had to have been a catcher.
Yeah, similar to how the two-way player rule works, in which you have to have a set minimum of innings and at-bats in games started. And also the other important thing, that 60-man roster is absolute. If you try to take someone off the 60-man roster, it is akin to releasing them. That if they're removed from that 60-man roster, they can no longer be added to your 60-man roster again. Although they can sign with another team and be added to their 60-man roster. So there are a lot of players who are the prospects that are being added. The Marlins' top draft choice this year, his name is escaping me at the moment, but he's being added to the 60-man roster because they expect him to be a fast riser for Derek Jeter and company. But this is going to be an interesting season. See if
especially if you get like a big outbreak. I mean, they said like if it's like an isolated one or two players, and it's gonna happen. They're on the road. Someone will stay behind, and they'll have to stay at a condo, a hotel, something. They'll work with the local team there if they can't drive back. Say if the Yankees are playing in Miami, although the Yankees have minor league stuff in Florida, so that would be a little easier for that, but something to that effect, you wouldn't really be able to fly back, so you'd have to like stay there in Florida.
And
but if you get a big outbreak and you're losing a big chunk of your players, you're going to have to eat into that 60-man team, which hopefully for I guess some teams' sakes, for control, as long as players aren't on for 61 games, they will not qualify for that like time period, so they'll be able to have another year of control over some of these young players.
Yeah, and also let's not forget that Commissioner Manfred still has the authority to shut down a season if an outbreak gets too big, and I believe it can be as few as 3 or 4 players on the major league roster that on the main roster. So it'll be interesting to see. This will be basically the grand experiment of trying to start a season during a global pandemic, and we'll see how it.
And NASCAR sort of had a couple fans, and depending on what local stuff is, teams are looking to get fans back into the stands, get things that they want. Food, jerseys, whatever.
That Major League Baseball is allowing local authorities to dictate, and some some of these reports were before the recent outbreaks in the U.S., but some places that we're discussing were Houston, Miami, other teams. I imagine Kansas City, considering that they social distance every game regularly. So
so does Tampa Bay.
Yeah, true.
But that's still a hot spot somehow.
Yeah.
I guess everyone's going to watch them at the bars.
Yeah.
But so it'll be interesting for that to possibly see some fans coming to the games. I enjoy going to games, but.
Yeah, and one last thing before we move on to football, because we spent like the last 15, 20 minutes just talking about baseball. There's a lot of sports that have gone on today. But the last thing is for those interested in trades, because that's me. I love trades and stuff. The trade deadline is August 31st, and the deadline for being eligible for the postseason will be September 15th.
And also there's no spitting of any kind.
Yeah. No, there's no spitting of any kind.
You can have bubble gum though.
Yeah, you can have bubble gum.
Allowed.
And the injured list timelines will be 10 games and 45 games instead of the 10/15 days for hitters / pitchers.
And then if you're 60,
and 60. They're
24 hours separated, 2 tests. It's all in the 100+ page manual.
Yeah, but there is no minimum length for a corona. Now let's shift gears a bit to NFL, because NFL we had 2 big things. The first thing that broke was the NFL renders its verdict on the Patriots filming of the Bengals game last year. If you recall, during Week 14, that there were Patriots film crews set up in the press conference and filmed from the sidelines. and they were caught. And
Yeah.
their grand punishment was sent down of $1.1 million fine and stripped of a third-round pick in the 2021 draft.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know why you got to steal from the Bengals. I mean, I think that's more of an insult anyway that you got caught trying to steal from the Bengals. They're complete trash.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't. That's just embarrassing in itself. But the other major news is the Patriots, of course, have signed Cam Newton to a 1-year incentive-laden contract. Basically, he's going to make like the league minimum, but incentives can get him up to about 7.5 million, which for you and I is a lot of money, as we've discussed over these last couple of years here on the show.
Yeah.
But for football standards, a former MVP,
Three-time
quarterback who's brought his team to the Super Bowl.
Three-time Pro Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, and he's basically making less than the guy that replaced him in Carolina, and a couple other guys who have even been signed as rookies.
Yeah, but let's remember why Cam Newton's in this position.
Yeah,
First
he's
of all,
had
because
some shoulder injuries at the end of 2018, and then he had a Lisfranc foot injury last year that cost him 14 games.
Yeah, so he's played 16 games in the last 2 years, with only 2 of them last year. So
yeah, and the 2 of them there weren't even really that good.
Yeah, which is why the Panthers cut him loose, because it was kind of the same situation that a similar situation to what Peyton Manning found himself in at the tail end of his career, where injury sapped his time in Indianapolis, and they said, we have a quarterback coming up in Andrew Luck. We're gonna go with him. Thanks for the time, Peyton, but you haven't proved that you can stay on the field, which was much to the Denver Broncos favor.
Yeah, Broncos won a Super Bowl there. Took them 2 years, but
So
he
maybe
did what he needed.
Yeah, maybe Cam can find his success with Belichick and return to form.
Yeah, I mean, Josh McDaniels is a very good offensive coordinator. I mean, it's been rumored other teams have been really. I mean, he almost signed a couple of years back with another team. I'm forgetting which one, but they basically pulled him back, and I guess they sort of said, "Wink, wink, nudge, nudge." Belichick maybe done soon. Job's yours. And,
Yeah.
but we'll have to see in that. Other than that, there's not anything too crazy in the NFL at the moment.
No.
That's still
They're still in this.
up in the air.
Yeah, they're still waiting to see. One thing I did hear recently is that they agreed to cut the amount of preseason games in half. So only 2 preseason games instead of 4, and instead of their usual preseason training camps, they will train at their regular training camp facilities.
Well, it's about time with the preseason games. Too many players get injured there. Some players don't even play.
Yeah.
I remember when LaDainian Tomlinson was on the Chargers, he never played a preseason game until he came over to the Jets for those 2 years, and then he played in them. But it doesn't really make any sense to be out there. I mean, yeah, you want to get your rhythm in there, but it's not really anything.
Given circumstances, it can be.
It's more for like the guys who are like on the cusp of making the team or trying to become the starter, and showing what you have. But the first 2 preseason games are always trash.
Yeah.
You get like a guy who plays 1 set of downs, and that's about it, and then you pull your starter. But the NBA, to move on to that, doesn't have too much either. That's still starting up.
Yeah, players have been starting to return to have come down to Florida, descend on the Disney Wild World of Sports complex. They're staying at 3 hotels have been quarantined by Walt Disney World to service in these facilities since they're trying to quarantine at the same time Disney World itself is trying to reopen around it. So the Bucks, the Lakers, the Raptors, the Clippers, the Celtics, the Nuggets, the Jazz, and the Heat are staying at the Grand Destino Tower at Disney's Coronado Springs. The Thunder, the 76ers, the Rockets, the Pacers, the Mavericks, the Nets, the Grizzlies, and the Magic will be staying at the Grand Floridian Hotel. Why the Magic can't just stay at home considering they're in Orlando is beyond me. And finally, the Blazers, the Kings, the Pelicans, the Spurs, the Suns, and the Wizards will be staying at Disney's Yacht Club. Now, that's not really much sports news, but for those that are curious about it, that's where they're going to be staying, and that's where you can't be staying if you're trying to go down to Disney as they reopen.
Yep. Also with the NBA, there Chris Paul, the representative for the NBA's Players Association, has been in talks with allowing the players to have, instead of their last names on their jerseys, social justice or
Hashtags
on the back of their jerseys, so they can have the Black Lives Matter, I can't breathe, or if they strike a deal, I guess, with IHOP, I guess they can do that too. Although there's probably some provisions, but they're gonna try and do that. I guess that's sort of like what MLB does with its like Players Day, where you can have stupid names on there. That's actually one of the few things. It was Gardner, actually, I think.
Yeah,
Gardner.
Gardner.
Even though the Yankees don't have names on there, at least he just keeps it his regular name. So I respect him for that.
Yeah, and you're not going to see everyone in the NBA do it. You're never going to get everyone to agree on anything. Lord knows that no one will agree to everything. It's just human nature.
Yeah.
But considering there was some unrest with certain players that were concerned that the return to play will distract from their social justice issues, whether warranted or not, that this does help placate some of those concerns, and to the effect of what a lot of people in the NBA were saying, they can use their platform to elevate those causes,
yes,
which is how it should be. That I've famously had my stance against Colin Kaepernick and his protest, which I still disagree with.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, considering what has happened in the last month, I will slightly reconsider my stance and say that there should be an acceptable outlet during sports that you can voice your concerns and voice your opinions. It should be narrowly controlled, but there should be an avenue.
I think what they should do, and I believe the NFL has a policy on this, where you can't wear certain things like T-shirts.
Yeah.
You can't have, like Tim Tebow would put Bible verses on his black liner stuff underneath his eyes. So players would get in trouble if they took off their jerseys for something, or.
Well, the NFL, you swat a fly and you get a 5-game suspension.
Yeah, so I think that would be a good thing for the NFL to have.
Yeah.
Because that would give them like sort of a way, sort of like what the NBA is trying to do with get like their hashtags and whatnot on the back of their jerseys. But instead of doing that for like warm-ups, you can wear whatever shirt you want and do that, because the cameras are always watching that for the NFL for warm-ups and everything. I think that would be a good thing to do. I still am very against the kneeling during the national anthem. That's I'm not saying what they're protesting is wrong. I'm saying it's just the wrong place. That's not like, it's like counting apples and oranges. It's not the same thing.
For all its warts and the bruises, there are countries that have done far worse than the United States has done. And if anything, it's one moment where you just set aside all your sports rivalries, all your beef, all your issues, and for 2 minutes stand in solidarity. And that's all I ask. But
nothing comes back to me more than when the U.S. finally captured Osama bin Laden, and you saw, was it
during
Mets and Nationals?
It was during the Mets were at the Phillies, I believe, like the 5th inning, and all of a sudden you had chants of USA, and the broadcasters were very confused for 5 minutes until they were told what had just happened. But it's one of those.
And that was fans from both teams, division rivals, and they were all uniting together.
Yeah, it's one of the great moments in sports history.
or my favorite, a couple of years back they had in the NHL. The microphone went out for the singer in Canada
Oh yeah,
during the American national anthem, and the Canadian fans finished the American national anthem.
yeah,
America would not know the Canadian national anthem other than "Oh Canada," because that's all I know.
yeah.
But to segue back to the Black Lives Matter sort of situation, we sort of were talking about it with Bubba Wallace with NASCAR, and it turned out the FBI investigation was that it was not a noose, although LeBron James still is adamant about it. It was determined that it was from 2019 and that it was a garage door pulley. Although some people were like, well, why is it in the shape of a noose? Other people who are, I guess, Boy Scout experts have talked about that it's a different kind of knot, and there's plenty of different knots out there.
Yeah.
And people were like, this is this, that's that. They sort of had a whole thing where they processed with Bubba Wallace at last week's race.
And then the day after it comes out, and it was
Yeah,
interesting.
they should have really collected their stuff, and if it was leaking, they should have said alleged, not that it was, because that caused like way more attention than it probably should have gotten.
Right. And it was interesting to see Bubba Wallace, because initially, even as the report came out that they did not find it was the noose, he was on national TV saying, I don't care what they think, it's a noose. And then within 24 hours, he retracted that and said, I'm glad that
and he never even saw it, because he's not even allowed to be in that garage area because of the circumstances of COVID-19, or I guess what Donald Trump wants to call it now, which I guess we won't say what that is.
Yeah, let's not.
But whatever the new fad is.
Yeah, whatever.
But I'm not saying it was a big call for attention, but I kind of think, mostly because NASCAR is really the only thing that's been out these last couple weeks, it doesn't have as big of an audience as you would say even soccer.
Yeah. It got more attention than it normally would because of the circumstances.
Yes,
being the only sport, the racial issues that have gone on since the beginning.
Yeah, and then you heard in the Mike Joy and Jeff Gordon, they were given like a good 5-minute sort of forced script. It seemed like, because it just seemed like kind of uncomfortable of what they were talking. They kept repeating themselves. It was a big, sketchy sort of situation. You don't know how deep this runs or what's going on specifically, but the bottom line is it wasn't a noose. It wasn't directed towards him. LeBron's an idiot.
Well, LeBron was also the one that said he would not play without fans way back when this started.
Yeah.
So
We as much as I say LeBron's the best player, and I think he's better than Jordan, but sometimes
those are fighting words.
Sometimes I really do think that reporter was right and needs to shut up and dribble. Sometimes he's just biting off more than he can chew, and I know I've done that before. I might be doing that now.
Yeah.
But it's a little bit crazy. But you know what else is really crazy? The NHL right now. We'll talk about the hub cities, but let's sort of talk about the draft that's going on. So we have the draft order. Picking at number 8 is the Buffalo Sabres. Picks 4 through 8 were determined based on inverse order of regular season points percentage. So we have the Sabres, then the Devils picking at number 7, Ducks at 6, Ottawa Senators at 5, Detroit Red Wings picking at number 4. And then picking at number 3 are the Senators from the San Jose Sharks, and number 2, the Los Angeles Kings.
Then Seattle, the expansion team, at number 1.
No.
Really?
No. It is a placeholder team for one of the 8 teams who lose in the play-in round.
Really?
Yes. So, as a Rangers fan, there is a lot of chaos, and It took me about 20 minutes, no joke, to decipher it, and then my dad tried reading it in the paper, and he got frustrated. Uh, and more or less, how it works for the Rangers is they can try and win. They have all their healthy pieces. I think they have their lineups, their different lines, all sorted out. They're ready to go. I think they just have to figure out which goalie they're going to go with, which is probably going to be Shesterkin. But the Rangers could be the dark horse to win the Stanley Cup if things go their way. Or they can tank and get a 12.5% chance, that being one of 8 teams, to get the number 1 pick in the draft. Or they can win, and they're playing the Carolina Hurricanes, which the Hurricanes owe the Rangers a pick, the higher pick between Carolina and Toronto's first round pick. Though Toronto's is top 10 protected. So if Toronto loses their play-in round, and then they win the draft lottery, Toronto gets to keep their number 1 pick. The Hurricanes would not get that and then flip that to the Rangers. But if the Rangers do win, Carolina loses, Toronto loses, the Rangers, depending on where these teams all lose, the Rangers can pick as high as like 9th. They could go to 14th, 15th. If the Rangers go all the way and defeat Toronto in the Eastern Conference Finals, if it ends up that way, the Rangers can get the 31st and the 29th pick in the draft. So it's a whole lot of chaos, this draft. For the Rangers right now, of what could happen, what might happen, and it is quite interesting. But
among others,
not as more interesting though as the hub cities, which I think you have lined up.
Yeah, so it's saying that's all dependent on if the season gets underway. At the moment, they have not set a date on when the NHL will return to Phase 4, which is the resumption of play. That is being discussed between the NHL and the NHL Players Association, as well as a final decision on what 2 hub cities. And stop me when you heard this before, Joe, but the decision is Tuesday, tomorrow, as usual, right after we're done.
Yeah, well, I mean, it'll give us something to talk about next week, I guess, and we'll just be classically a day behind.
Yeah.
You know, that's just... Or you can delay fully uploading this and just put a little side comment in late now.
No, it's earlier than tomorrow. It could even be later. But the final cities are Las Vegas, Nevada, Edmonton in Alberta, I believe, if I remember my Canadian geography. Toronto, Ontario, Chicago, Illinois, and Los Angeles, California. It'll be 2 of those cities, and it'll be interesting to see which 2 finally, if it's the 2 Canadian cities because of the Canadian regulations, if it's 2 cities in the U.S., if it's based on those same regulations. And this is not being done in a vacuum. There are other terms that need to be discussed with this as well, not least of which is the financial state of the sport, which is not as strong as the other 3 major sports. That on July 1st, over $300 million in bonuses are scheduled to be paid out to players, and this is being done as I ran into this just as we were getting ready, but even at the beginning of April, when we were still wondering how long this would take, major credit agencies were expressing their concerns over what the shutdown would do to the NHL finances, not for this season since it's already done, but for next season, considering how sponsors will take back to the sport, how salaries will be impacted. Some teams that are already borrowing heavily even before the pandemic might be pushed into insolvency. So there are a lot of... It's the usual. There are a lot of moving parts in this.
Yeah, I know Rangers star forward Breadman Panarin.
Panera?
Panera Bread. His last name's Panarin, but they call him Breadman because it sounds like Panera Bread.
Yeah.
Um, and he's been very vocal these last couple weeks about making sure the escrow. I'm not very good with business finance.
Yeah.
Making sure that's how it works because apparently it's taken out of players' salaries before, and if the owners meet what they need, then the owners will give back everything to the players. But it's looking like the players are gonna owe like 35% of their salary this year back to the owners or whatever, and he's not happy. Some of the other players aren't happy.
And you wonder why Major League Baseball had so much trouble trying to get back to play.
Yeah, but what's crazy though is the NHL.
It sounds a lot like what MLB they've been going through with how much and any advance and all that. But go ahead.
I mean, what's crazy though is I think the cap room for an NHL team is like $81 million for the year. Which
81 and a half. For the next
is
two
for
seasons.
us would love to have. That would solve a lot of my problems.
Yeah.
But compared to like MLB, the Yankees, Dodgers, Red Sox, those guys are all hovering at $200 million. Not saying all MLB teams are like that. Basketball, I don't even want to understand that with max contracts, super max contracts. That stuff is just like too far out there for me. But to have like some of your best players in hockey compared to the other three major cornerstones in United States sports, they're making pennies compared to some of these other guys, and it's just crazy. When honestly, I will say hitting a baseball is probably the hardest thing to do.
Yeah.
But being a hockey player, hockey is, I think, the toughest sport to play, and these guys are, once again, I've said it, the toughest and I think best athletes overall.
And by comparison, as you said, that 81.5 million figure, the Kansas City Royals. No, actually, I lied. The Kansas City Royals are just above that, but the Tampa Bay Rays, the Pittsburgh Pirates, the Miami Marlins, and the Baltimore Orioles are the only teams in Major League Baseball that have a total salary less than that $81.5 million figure in NHL.
Yeah, which those are mostly small market teams that don't really do much, and except for Tampa Bay, who always seems to like put themselves together.
They have a good front office.
Great front office, and then the Royals, who decided to go all in for 2 years with a super bullpen and won a World Series out of that. Well, they didn't win it; the Mets lost it.
But as I said, that you have teams like the Tampa Bay Lightning that have serious troubles bringing fans to their to the seats, even before the pandemic. Same thing, the Coyotes, the same way that when they were bought last year, they were estimated at $300 million net worth, but an equivalent amount of debt, while losing $50 million a year.
Yeah.
And there are other teams that are like that as well. So it'll be interesting to see what I'll be fascinated, and this goes for all the major sports. I'm interested to see what the long-term effects are, not just on rules, but on what teams are financially wounded, some maybe even mortally.
Yeah, I mean, we saw the re-up start for Vince McMahon for not arena football, but whatever it is.
The
XFL.
Yeah, the XFL. That's dead.
That was just really unfortunate because I was all psyched to go see some games. But back to the hub cities for the NHL before we both overheat of heat exhaustion.
Yeah. We've been going for like 40, 45 minutes.
Edmonton's very up north, which is nice and cold compared to our respective bedrooms. So it's kind of far compared to Chicago and Toronto. Toronto and Chicago are, I'm not saying next door neighbors, but they're both more feasible to shuffle teams back and forth if need be. But Las Vegas and Los Angeles, meanwhile,
that's
are
probably
a lot closer.
Yeah.
But California's a little loose too, especially LA. So they're a little bit liberal there, and that might cause a bit of an outbreak. So I don't know. I think I'm a little biased towards maybe Chicago and Toronto.
You're not the only one. My money would be on Chicago, Toronto, or Edmonton. Be two of those three.
Yeah, just because Las Vegas and LA, while they're both close to each other, they've got too much party going on.
Yeah,
and I think that would just make it worse. Although I think the way some of the hockey players are, I don't think they'd really engage in that as much. But you never know.
Yeah, it remains to be seen, and we will cover this all next week when hopefully we have an announcement on when they'll to coin the MLB phrase, where and when NHL will return. But until then, it has been a pleasure as always talking with sports. Now that we can talk about sports and stuff happening again, Joe.
Yes, and we'll see. Did you get the call back for your job?
I'm waiting on Major League Baseball to formally announce a schedule, which hopefully should be sometime this week. So
right.
that's something.
Until then, collect your $600 and
wash your hands, wear your mask,
and enjoy a great rest of the week.
Goodbye, everyone.